Hey, welcome back to Steve Horvath Fishing. Today we're going to talk about pitching and flipping. A lot of people have a lot of issues with pitching and flipping. They lose a lot of fish. Now, because of the fact that sometimes when you're fishing really heavy cover, you're going to lose some fish, it makes it a technique where every now and then you do lose a few. But it can be minimized. I mean really minimized. So, number one, the biggest issue I see is people not using the right hook. It's pretty simple. You need to use a nice big thick hook. Okay? Grab one. And this is not going to be what you think. Okay? Universally accepted that pitching and flipping, and you're going to use a Texas rig, you want a straight shank hook. Okay? Nothing big there, but here's the deal. A lot of times you don't need the great big 5/0 shark hook. A lot of times you do better with a 3/0, and you can see the difference in the size of the hook. Now you would think that with this big hook, you're going to have this much bigger bite and hook the fish better. Well, sometimes that's true and sometimes it's false, and here's the big false part. Have you ever noticed if you watch guys pitching and flipping on TV that sometimes they set the hook and they got this great big hook and fish comes flying out by them and falls off the hook? There's a lot of barb that has to penetrate with this big hook. Now, it could be super sharp, but if the bass doesn't offer enough resistance, you're pretty much going to launch that poor sucker right out of the water and sometimes not get them. It happens. So by going to a little smaller hook, you have a smaller barb to set into the fish, hook fish better. Problem solved. What's the next problem? Well, the next problem I see is people that are attempting to flip while they're pitching and pitch while they should be flipping, and pitch and cast when they should be pitching. I know, it's a mouthful. I barely got it out, okay? Here's the scoop. Casting accuracy is paramount, okay? Paramount. When you're pitching and flipping, it's pretty much, you got to be right on target. If you're going to miss it by a foot, you might as well not even attempt it, okay? So, the reason that people make this mistake is they overestimate their ability to hit a target, which means most of the time they're farther from what they're pitching and flipping from than they think, or that they think they're capable of. Here's a good rule of thumb. I've got a 20-foot Triton. Big deal, he's got a 20-foot Triton. No, I've got a 20-foot Triton. I kind of use that as, if I'm going to make a pitch, I want to be somewhere around that 20-foot range. Most of the time with reasonable water quality, that's not too close to be to the fish. Okay. Next thing. People use the wrong, in my opinion, the wrong gear ratio reel for flipping and pitching. Now, there are reasons why they do it, and sometimes it's because you want to get the bait in and out quicker. Fantastic. Okay, they go to an 8, 9, 10-to-1 reel. It's my opinion that you're better off with a 6-to-1, 7-to-1 tops speed reel. Now you're going to say, Steve, how are you going to reel that fish up out of the cover? Well, if I'm 20 feet from the cover and I'm using a 7-foot rod or 7.5-foot rod or even an 8-foot rod, I'm pretty close to that fish. Now, unless I'm fishing matted hyacinths, or I'm in the middle of the tree where chances are that fish stands a good chance of getting off no matter what your real gear ratio is, I'm going to get that fish. You're going to work harder with your 9 or 10-to-1 reel to crank the handle to move that fish. But between the rod and my lower gear ratio, I can move that fish further easier. At least that's my opinion. Okay, what's next? Using the wrong bait. Now, it's not using the wrong brand or wrong this or wrong that. There's a bunch of baits that work. And let's go into some of the baits that work. For a craw imitation, Zoom Z-Craw, Z-Craw Jr. Great baits. Zoom Baby Brush Hog, or the mid-sized brush hog, even the big brush hog. Great baits. Have their drawbacks, and we'll go over that, but great pitching and flipping baits. How about a Rage Craw? Okay? Good pitching and flipping bait, especially grass and maybe some hyacinth stuff like that. And how about this one? I don't mention it a lot, but it's definitely in my wheelhouse, and I fish it quite a bit. Missile baits, either the D-bomb or the baby D-bomb. Great pitching and flipping baits. Now, when I'm talking about the wrong bait, I'm talking a bait that you cannot get through the cover on your flip or pitch to get down to the fish. And what I mean by it is, take this baby brush hog. Great bait. Catch the snot out of them. But what happens is you go to flip or pitch, and somewhere on the way into that tree, these little legs or whatever are going to hit a branch, and they're going to want to stick to that branch, and it kills your cast. It'll either stick to the branch or it'll fall short, and you're not getting into where the fish are. So when the cover is denser, out comes something that's more compact, a smaller package to get through there, something like the D-bomb. Oh, you're a little bent up, leg there, crippled D-bomb. Okay, now got the right bait, maybe. What's the next problem? You've got the wrong sinker. Now, I flip and pitch with anywhere from a 3/16 all the way up to over an ounce, depending on the cover. Now, what I want to tell you is the weight of the sinker decides the rate of fall for the bait. Makes sense, right? Heavier sinker, bait falls faster. Why is that important? Because it's my theory that the clearer the water, the faster I want the bait to fall. I don't want the fish to get such a great look at it. Okay, so clearer water, I'll fish either a smaller bait, which I can make fall fast, or I'll fish a bait that doesn't have, I got this wrinkled D-bomb. I'll fish a bait that doesn't have a ton of action, like this, or Rage makes one, it's a rodent or something like that. Again, great bait, okay? So, the next thing I'm going to tell you is, if you take the same sinker and you take a Rage Craw and something like a D-bomb and throw them, they'll sink at a different rate. The Rage Craw, because it's got the claws all flapping and stuff like that, it's going to sink a lot slower. The D-bomb will sink faster. So I would go up one size weight if you're going to fish something with an action type of legs or craws or whatever you want to call them, from whatever size you were using. Now, if the water's dirty and you want that action, you also want a little slower fall. So maybe you're going to go down to a 1/4 ounce or a 3/8, so that you do have the vibration and the fish can tell that the bait's coming to them. Let's talk about jigs. Jigs are cool. They make flipping jigs, they make pitching jigs. The big difference between the two, okay, and I've got 2 of them here. I do quite a bit of fishing with the Dirty Jigs, brand Jigs. Not sponsored by them, happen to like them. Scott Canterbury flipping jig. Luke Clausen compact pitching jig. Now, you're going to tell me that if I'm flipping, I should use this one, and if I'm pitching, I should use this one. Okay, I'll buy it, but why? If I'm pitching, and I'm doing more pitching than flipping, okay, I'm generally fishing much sparser cover. The hook on this jig, although it's a decent hook, is nowhere near as stout as the flipping hook. Now, if I'm going to be pitching a flipping jig into dense cover, I'm going to go with a flipping jig because of the dense cover. If I'm pitching, I'll be using a pitching jig around docks and sparser covers. It could be a laydown, it could be a log, it could be something like that. It can be cover, just not as thick a cover as this jig can handle. Now, let's talk about trailers again. Say I'm fishing this jig. Depending on what trailer I use will depend on the rate of fall. Okay, so if we take the jig, slap a D-bomb on her, it falls at 1 speed. Take that same jig, slap a rage crawl on it, it falls slower. Now here's my recommendation. Dirtier water, 3/8 to a 1/2 ounce jig, and something like a rage crawl. You need the action, it can fall slower, it'll make you fish a little bit slower. In clearer water, I'm going to say a 1/2, 5/8, or even 3/4, and a bait like the D-bomb as a trailer, or the rodent. What that'll enable you to do is you're going to be able to fish faster, cover more water, because the fish in clear water are much more likely to see this drop in front of them, and then they have to make up their mind, am I going to eat it? Am I not going to eat it? To me, it's pretty simple. I've been doing this a long time. For somebody that hasn't, it could be confusing. Let's talk about rods. I need a flipping stick. I need a custom flipping stick. I need the most expensive flipping stick money could buy if I'm going to be doing this stuff. Well, no, you don't. You can pitch and do some flipping, which is, most people don't flip much. I mean, honestly, you need pretty thick, pretty bland type of cover with no indentations and changes to be able to do a lot of flipping. One of the best rods that you can own to do a lot of pitching is a 7-foot medium heavy rod with 15-pound line, or in thicker cover, 20-pound line. That's all you need. Now, for something a little bit heavier, got the Lew's grass rod, 7'3". Just got the rod, haven't even caught a fish on it. So far, I like the action of the rod. It's a little stiffer than a medium heavy. It's a heavy, but it's got a good amount of backbone. It's got a little bit of tip. It's got just enough tip to load up to be able to make a pitch. Well, a flip you can just swing out there. So to be able to pitch, it's got enough tip. Now, as you could see, another little something on my line that I'm using. There's a school of thought that says a lot of times you don't peg a sinker, because the sinker being pegged can actually help the fish throw it. And that's true. It's absolutely true. But I'm going to tell you that when I pitch and when I flip, by pegging the sinker with the bobber stop, it keeps my package intact. The bait doesn't move, the sinker doesn't get away from it, it all goes into the cover and comes out of the cover. Next thing we're going to talk about, how are we going to tie this on? This hook is snelled. Come in from the bottom through the eye and tie your snell knot. Now, the reason that it's snelled, and I'm a believer in this, is that when you put pressure against this hook, it's going to want to do that in the fish's mouth, which makes it that much easier for you to hook the fish. Took me years to try it, to be honest with you. I'm a believer. But if you take these tips that I just gave you, it should solve 99.9% of your flipping issues. Hey, for Steve Horvath, I'm Steve Horvath. I am, eh? Am I Steve? Yeah, I'm Steve, right? Yeah. Okay. Hey, for Steve Horvath Fishing, I'm Steve.